They say death is the hardest goodbye, but they are wrong. The true tragedy is waking up next to the man who swore to protect you for 5 years, only to realize he is the danger. I assumed Garrett's second phone held boring trade secrets, but when the screen lit up at 3 in the morning with my cousin's name, I knew I was not just losing a husband, I was facing a war launched by the people I loved. My name is Raina Whitmore. At 34 years old, I had cultivated a reputation that was as impenetrable as the firewalls I sold to the Department of Defense. I was the CEO of Aegis Dynamics, a fortress of a company that specialized in high-level cybersecurity and next-generation biometric defense. My life was a series of encrypted algorithms and fail-safe protocols, designed to keep chaos at bay. I lived in a world where safety was a commodity I manufactured, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder on Wall Street. It was a sterile, controlled, and immensely profitable existence. To the outside world, my life was the pinnacle of the American dream. I resided in a sprawling penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of the Millennium Tower in Chicago. It was a space of glass, steel, and Italian marble, floating 600 feet above the grit of the city streets. From my living room, Lake Michigan looked like a sheet of dark, hammered lead, indifferent and vast. The air inside was always filtered, always set to a crisp 68 degrees. Smelling faintly of white tea and money, it was quiet here. Too quiet. Sometimes. But I told myself that silence was the sound of security. My husband, Garrett, was the warmth that made the glass castle habitable. Garrett was a venture capitalist, a man whose charm was as liquid as the assets he managed. He was handsome in that effortless, old money way, sandy hair that fell just right, a jawline that suggested strength, but a smile that promised kindness. We had been married for 5 years. 5 years of what I believed was a perfect partnership. He respected my long hours. I respected his need for autonomy. We were a power couple, the darlings of the society pages, always photographed with champagne flutes in hand, looking toward a bright, shared future. It was a Tuesday evening, and the city lights were just beginning to assert themselves against the twilight. We were hosting a small, intimate dinner. The guest of honor, if you could call her that, was my cousin, Serafina. Serafina was everything I was not, where I was sharp angles and tailored suits. She was flowing linen and oversized cardigans. She was an artist, a painter of abstract emotions that I never quite understood but always funded. I had been her safety net since her parents died when she was 20. I paid for her studio in the art district. I paid for her supplies. I even bought a few of her paintings to hang in the guest corridors of the penthouse. I loved her with the fierce, protective instinct of an older sister, always viewing her as a fragile thing that would break if exposed to the harsh winds of reality. "This risotto is divine, Garrett," Serafina said, her voice breathy and delicate. She was picking at her food, a habit that always made me want to order her a steak. She looked up at him through her lashes, her expression one of wide-eyed admiration. "You really do everything perfectly, don't you?" Garrett laughed, a rich baritone sound that vibrated through the mahogany table. He reached over and squeezed my hand, his thumb tracing the knuckles. "I just follow the recipe. Sarah, the real genius at this table is Raina. She closed the deal with the Tokyo Bank today, $300 million in projected revenue over the next quarter." I felt a flush of pride, not at the number, but at the way he said it. He wasn't threatened by my success. He celebrated it. That was rare. "It is just business," I said, taking a sip of the Pinot Noir. "Security is a recession-proof industry. People are always afraid of losing what they have." "That sounds so intense," Serafina murmured, shivering slightly as if a draft had passed through the room. She looked at me, her eyes shimmering with a moisture that seemed permanently present. "I don't know how you do it. Raina, the pressure, the paranoia, doesn't it exhaust you? Constantly looking for enemies?" "It is not paranoia if the threats are real," I corrected her gently, "and it is my job to be the wall so others can sleep." "Well, I am grateful for you," Serafina said, raising her glass. The crystal caught the light of the chandelier. To Reina, my rock, I do not know where I would be without you. To Reina, Garrett echoed, his eyes locking with mine. The strongest woman I know. The dinner concluded with the usual pleasantries. Serafina lingered, complaining about a draft in her studio, and I immediately wrote her a check to buy a new industrial heater. She hugged me tight, smelling of lavender and turpentine. Before Garrett walked her to the elevator, I watched them from the hallway. I saw Garrett place a hand on the small of her back as the elevator doors slid open. It was a gesture of guidance, of brotherly care. I smiled, thinking how lucky I was to have a husband who treated my family as his own. The penthouse grew quiet after she left. The staff had retired for the evening. I was exhausted, the adrenaline of the Tokyo deal finally fading into a heavy fatigue. I unpinned my hair, letting it fall onto my shoulders, and walked into the master bedroom. Garrett was already there, changing out of his dress shirt. He looked tired, lines of stress bracketing his mouth. He picked up a sleek black smartphone from the dresser, not his usual silver one, but a new model he had brought home last week. "Are you coming to bed?" I asked, slipping under the Egyptian cotton sheets. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I wish. The partners in Zurich are having a meltdown over the new compliance regulations. I have to hop on a secure conference call. It is going to be a late one." "Use the office," I suggested sleepily. "The reception is better in the living room," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. His lips were cool. "Go to sleep, darling. You have earned it. I will try not to wake you when I come in." "What is with the second phone?" I asked, my eyes already closing. "Company policy," he murmured, turning away. "Separate device for European secure servers. Boring trade secret stuff. You know the drill." I did know the drill. In my line of work, compartmentalization was key. I drifted off to sleep with the image of my hard-working husband sacrificing his rest for our future. Feeling safe, feeling loved. I woke up at 3 a.m. It was a deep, guttural thirst that pulled me from my dreams. The air in the bedroom was dry. I reached out to the other side of the king-sized bed. The sheets were cold, smooth, undisturbed, and cold. Garrett had not come to bed. I sat up, blinking against the darkness. A faint sense of unease pricked at the back of my neck. It was likely he had fallen asleep on the sofa. He had done it before when deals ran long. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the plush carpet, and grabbed my silk robe. I walked down the long, shadowed hallway toward the living room. The penthouse was bathed in the ghostly blue glow of the city lights filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a beautiful, haunting illumination. I rounded the corner and saw him. Garrett was sprawled on the oversized leather sectional. His head tipped back, his mouth slightly open in deep slumber. His tie was loosened, his vest unbuttoned. He looked peaceful, almost boyish. On the floor, just below his dangling hand, lay the black phone. It must have slipped from his grip when he drifted off. I moved to cover him with a throw blanket. My movements practiced and tender. I did not want to wake him. As I bent down to retrieve the phone and place it on the coffee table, the device vibrated. It was a short, sharp buzz against the hardwood floor. I froze. Then, the screen lit up. The brightness was blinding in the dim room. I squinted, looking at the lock screen. It was not a number. It was a name saved in the contacts. Serafina. My heart stuttered. Why was my cousin texting my husband at 3 a.m? Was there an emergency? Was she hurt? Had the heater I paid for malfunctioned? I knelt, my knees pressing into the hard wood, and looked closer at the preview message displayed on the screen. The text was crisp, clear, and terrifying. "I have the power of attorney papers ready. Tomorrow we start the plan to commit her." The world did not spin. It stopped. The silence of the penthouse suddenly felt heavy, crushing, like deep water. I read the words again and again. Commit her. There was only one her in this equation. I looked at Garrett. He was still breathing rhythmically, the gentle rise and fall of his chest mocking the violence of the words on the screen. The man who had toasted to my strength 4 hours ago was plotting to strip me of my mind, and Serafina, the fragile artist, the girl whose life I had subsidized for a decade, power of attorney. A wave of nausea rolled through me, hot and acidic. My hands started to shake, a fine tremor that rattled my bones. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him awake and demand an answer. I wanted to throw the phone through the $10,000 window pane. But I was Raina Whitmore. I built security systems for banks that held the gold reserves of nations. I did not panic. I analyzed, threat detected, assess, contain, neutralize. The mantra of my professional life overrode the heartbreak of my personal one. I needed more than a preview. I needed the thread. I needed to see how long this had been happening. I reached out, my hand steadying through sheer force of will. I picked up the phone. It was locked. Of course. I looked at Garrett's hand, hanging limp over the edge of the sofa. I knew his passcode was likely his birthday or mine, but modern phones lock you out after too many wrong attempts. Biometrics were faster. I gently, ever so gently, lifted his right hand. He murmured something in his sleep and shifted. I froze, holding my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He settled back down. I pressed his thumb against the sensor on the side of the phone. The haptic engine buzzed. Fingerprint accepted. I swiped up to open the phone. System alert. Secondary authentication required. Iris scan initiated. A red light pulsed from the front-facing camera. I cursed silently. Of course, it was a dual authentication setup. Garrett was not just hiding a fling, he was hiding a conspiracy. He had set this phone up with the same level of security I used for my classified files. He knew I could bypass a fingerprint if I really wanted to, but he knew I could not fake his eyes. The phone screen went black as the scan failed. I sat back on my heels, the adrenaline turning into cold, calculating ice. I could not get in, not without waking him up and forcing his eyes open, which would blow my cover immediately. If I confronted him now, he would spin a lie. He would say it was a misunderstanding. He would delete the messages. He would gaslight me. And if they were planning to commit me, any outburst from me would just be used as evidence of my instability. Evidence. I needed to preserve the evidence. I reached into the pocket of my robe where I kept my own personal phone. I pulled it out and opened the camera app. I tapped the screen of Garrett's phone one more time to wake it up. The message from Serafina lit up the dark again. I have the power of attorney papers ready. Tomorrow we start the plan to commit her. I took a picture, then another, ensuring the timestamp and the sender's name were perfectly legible. I placed Garrett's phone back on the floor, exactly where it had fallen, angling it precisely to match the way it lay before. I smoothed the rug. I checked to make sure I hadn't left any footprints in the plush carpet nap. I stood up, looking down at my husband. He looked the same as he had 5 minutes ago, but the man I saw was gone. In his place lay a stranger, a parasite that had attached itself to my life. I turned and walked back to the bedroom. My movements were mechanical. I climbed back into the cold bed and stared at the ceiling. The tears did not come, not yet. The shock was a dam holding them back. Instead, a singular, terrifying clarity began to form in my mind. They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take my company, my money, and my freedom. They wanted to lock me away in a padded room while they drank my wine and spent my fortune. Garrett shifted in the other room. The floorboard creaked. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, feigning sleep. But under the duvet, my hands were clenched into fists so tight my fingernails cut into my palms. They had made a fatal error. They thought they were trapping a wife. They forgot they were hunting a predator. Tomorrow, the game would begin. But tonight, I had to be the perfect victim. The morning sun that flooded the penthouse breakfast nook usually felt like a baptism, a wash of golden light that promised a fresh start. Today, however, it felt like an interrogation lamp. I sat at the marble island, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. My posture was perfect, my spine a rod of steel, but behind my sunglasses, my eyes were tracking every micro-expression in the room. Garrett was making omelets. It was a domestic performance he excelled at, flipping the eggs with a casual grace that suggested he had not a care in the world. He was whistling a tune, something light and jazzy. It was terrifying how normal he looked. Less than 5 hours ago, I had seen the digital evidence of his treachery. Yet here he was, asking me if I wanted chives or cheddar. Then the doorbell rang. "I will get it," Garrett said, wiping his hands on a towel. "It is probably Serafina. She said she might drop by to pick up that old easel you promised her." I did not move. I watched him walk to the door, his stride confident. When he returned, Serafina was trailing behind him. She wore an oversized sweater that hung off one shoulder, looking purposefully disheveled, the quintessential struggling artist. "Morning, Raina," she chirped, her voice a little too high, a little too bright. She moved to give me a hug. I allowed it. I felt her thin arms wrap around my shoulders, smelling the dampness of the morning air and the faint, cloying scent of vanilla perfume. My body remained rigid, but she did not seem to notice, or perhaps she did not care. "Coffee?" Garrett offered, pouring a mug before she even answered. "You are a lifesaver," she sighed, taking the cup. Their fingers brushed. It was a small thing, a fraction of a second, but to my heightened senses, it was a thunderclap. His pinky finger lingered against her palm. Her eyes darted to his face, held his gaze for a beat too long, and then flickered away. It was a look of shared intimacy, a silent communication of conspirators acknowledging their secret. In the past, I would have seen a brother-in-law being kind to family. Now, I saw the possessiveness. I saw the hunger. I took a sip of my cold coffee to hide the grimace that threatened to break my composure. The text message from the night before burned in my memory. Commit her. That was the key. If this were a simple affair, they would just leave. Garrett could divorce me, take half the assets under our prenuptial agreement, which was generous but not ruinous, and walk away. But they did not want half. They wanted it all. And to get it all, they needed me out of the picture without me being legally able to fight back. They needed to prove I was mentally unfit. They needed to strip me of my agency so Garrett could step in as my guardian. It was not a crime of passion. It was a hostile takeover. "You look tired, darling," Garrett said, leaning against the counter, his brow furrowed with concern. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," I lied smoothly. "Bad dreams." "I told you," he said, turning to Serafina. "She works too hard. The stress is eating her alive. You really should take better care of yourself." "Raina," Serafina added, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. "You have been so forgetful lately. Remember last week when you lost your keys? And the week before when you forgot our lunch date?" I had not lost my keys. Garrett had moved them, and we never had a lunch date scheduled. I realized now that the gaslighting had started months ago. They were planting seeds of doubt in my mind, waiting for them to germinate into madness. Garrett reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, amber glass bottle without a label. "I spoke to Dr. Eris about your fatigue," Garrett said, sliding the bottle across the marble counter toward me. "He recommended these new supplements, high-grade nootropics and vitamins. They are supposed to help with clarity and mood stabilization. He said to take one every morning with food." I looked at the bottle. It looked innocuous, just a brown jar that could have come from any high-end pharmacy. "Doctor, Eris prescribed these without seeing me?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "He trusts my description of your symptoms," Garrett said, his smile tight. "Please, Raina. For me, I hate seeing you like this. Just try them." He shook a single pill out into his hand. It was a pale blue capsule. He held it out to me like a communion wafer. The room felt suddenly airless. If I refused, he would know I was suspicious. If I took it, I was poisoning myself. I reached out and took the pill. Thank you. Garrett, you are always looking out for me. I popped the capsule into my mouth, grabbed my water glass, and took a large gulp. I felt the water go down, but the pill remained tucked safely between my cheek and my gum. It was a trick I had learned from a client who ran a covert operations unit. There, I said, offering a weak smile. I feel better already. Garrett's shoulders relaxed. Good. Now, eat some eggs. I managed a few bites, excused myself to the bathroom to spit the dissolving capsule into a tissue, wrapped it carefully, and placed it in the hidden pocket of my blazer. 10 minutes later, I was in the elevator, descending toward the garage. As the doors closed, shutting out the sight of my husband and cousin laughing softly in my kitchen, the mask of the vulnerable wife dropped. I drove to Aegis Dynamics in silence. The hum of the engine was the only sound I could tolerate. When I walked into the lobby of my company, the shift in my demeanor was absolute. Here, I was not a victim. I was the architect. Good morning, Ms. Whitmore? The security guard nodded as I passed the biometric scanners. Morning, Kevin. Lock down the executive floor. I do not want to be disturbed, I commanded. I entered my office, a space of glass walls and sleek technology, and sat behind my desk. I did not turn on the lights. The glow from my 3 monitors was enough. First, the surveillance. I logged into the private server that hosted the security feeds for the penthouse. I had designed the system myself. It was supposed to be impenetrable. I pulled up the access logs for the past 6 months. I filtered the search for my travel dates, the weeks I was in London, Tokyo, and Dubai. The results populated the screen. On every single date, I was out of the country. Serafina's access code had been used to enter the penthouse. That was expected. What was not expected was the video feed status. Log entry, camera system maintenance, user, admin, Garrett W. Duration, 8 hours. Every time she entered, the cameras went dark. Garrett had been manually overriding the recording function, citing firmware updates or system glitches in the logs. He used the very tools I taught him against me. He knew exactly how to blind the system just enough to hide his activities, but not enough to trigger a remote alarm on my phone. It was sloppy, though. A professional would have looped old footage. Garrett just turned it off. He was arrogant. He assumed I would never audit my own home. Next, the money. I pulled up our joint accounts and the investment portfolios. On the surface, the numbers were balanced. The mortgage was paid. The dividends were reinvested, and the credit card bills were high, but within standard limits for our lifestyle. But I looked closer. I looked at the transaction times and the merchant codes. There were repeated withdrawals of cash, always just under the $10,000 reporting limit. $9,500 here, $9,800 there. Over the last year, it added up to nearly $250,000. Where was the cash going? You cannot trace cash, but you can trace the absence of it. And then there were the consulting fees paid from Garrett's venture firm to a company called Blue Heron Holdings in Delaware. It was buried deep in the quarterly reports, disguised as market research expenses. I made a mental note. Blue Heron Holdings. I would need to dig into that later. Finally, the pill. I took the tissue from my pocket. The blue capsule was slightly sticky now, the gelatin casing beginning to dissolve. I placed it in a sterile sample bag and walked down the hall to the RD lab. The lab was empty, save for Dr. Aris, not the family doctor Garrett mentioned, but Dr. Lynn, my lead biosecurity researcher. She looked up, surprised to see me. Raina, I did not expect you down here. I need a spectral analysis on this, I said, handing her the bag. Priority Alpha, off the books. And Lynn, do not log this in the company database. Send the results directly to my encrypted server. She saw the look in my eyes and did not ask questions. Give me 20 minutes. I waited in my office, watching the city below. The cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. I felt a strange detachment, a coldness spreading through my limbs that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, when the notification pinged on my private tablet. I took a deep breath. Subject: unknown blue capsule. Composition analysis: primary agent, scopolamine derivative, secondary agent, psilocybin, synthetic, tertiary agent, haloperidol. I stared at the screen. I was not a chemist, but I knew what these were. Scopolamine, the devil's breath. It made people docile, suggestible, and caused memory loss. Psilocybin, a hallucinogen. It would cause visual and auditory distortions. Haloperidol, an antipsychotic. But if given to a healthy person in combination with the others, it would induce severe motor restlessness and confusion. It was a chemical cocktail designed to mimic a psychotic break. If I took these every day, within a week I would be hallucinating. I would be forgetting conversations. I would be pliable and confused. I would be exactly what they needed me to be. A woman losing her mind. Garrett was not just trying to steal my company. He was systematically dismantling my brain. I leaned back in my leather chair. A single tear escaped, hot and angry, tracking down my cheek. I wiped it away immediately. That was the last tear I would shed for the man I married. They wanted a crazy woman? Fine, I would give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. But while they watched the show, I would be rewriting the script. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "Elias?" I said when the line clicked open. "It is Raina. I have a job for you, and you are going to want to bring your full toolkit." The silence of the predator was over. The hunt had begun. Elias Thorne was the kind of man who existed in the negative spaces of society. He was not on any census, he had no credit score, and his digital footprint was a ghostly void that even my best algorithms struggled to track. We met in the back room of a dusty antique bookstore in the Old Town district, a place that smelled of mildew and forgotten history. It was the only place Elias felt safe, surrounded by analog paper that could not be hacked. I sat across from him at a scarred oak table. Elias was 50, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and eyes that had seen too many governments topple. He was not a lover, never had been. He was a resource, a tool I kept sharp with a retainer fee that cost more than most people's mortgages. "Blue Heron Holdings," Elias said, his voice a low rumble. He slid a manila folder across the table. "You were right to be suspicious, Raina, but you were wrong about the scale. You are thinking it is a leak. It is not a leak. It is a flood." I opened the folder. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned. Inside were documents of incorporation from Delaware. "Serafina is not just a struggling artist," Elias continued, leaning back and cleaning his spectacles with a calmness that infuriated me. "She is the sole beneficiary of Blue Heron Holdings and another shell company called Obsidian Ventures. These companies are not empty. Raina, they are holding assets, significant ones." I scanned the papers. My eyes widened as I recognized the serial numbers of the intellectual property. "These are my patents," I whispered, the air leaving my lungs. "The retinal scanning algorithm, the dynamic voice recognition protocol. These are the core technologies of Aegis Dynamics. Transferred," Elias corrected, "under the guise of development partnerships and licensing agreements. Your husband, acting as CFO, signed these over 6 months ago. He effectively sold your life's work to your cousin for $1 per contract, on paper. It looks like a bad business deal. In reality, it is asset stripping. They are hollowing out your company from the inside so that when they take over, the valuable parts are already owned by Serafina personally." I felt a cold sweat prickle along my spine. Garrett had not just been sleeping with her. He had been systematically dismantling my empire and handing it to her, piece by piece. He was stealing my genius and gifting it to a woman who could barely operate a microwave. "There is more," Elias said. His tone changed. It lost its professional detachment and took on a rare note of hesitation. I dug into the personal lives. I tracked Serafina's movements. "You said she lived in a studio apartment in the Arts District?" "Yes, I pay the rent." "She does have that apartment, but she rarely stays there. She spends 4 nights a week at a house in the suburbs. Naperville. A nice place. 4 bedrooms. Big yard. Whose house is it? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. Technically, it belongs to an LLC owned by Blue Heron, Elias said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a stack of photographs. He placed them face down on the table. Raina, you need to prepare yourself. Show me, I commanded. He flipped the first photo. It was a picture of a house, charming and suburban. He flipped the second. It was Garrett, carrying groceries into the house, laughing. He flipped the third. The world shattered. It was Serafina, sitting on the front porch swing, but she was not alone. Sitting on her lap was a toddler, a boy. He looked to be about 2 years old. He had sandy blonde hair. He had a jawline that was already defining itself. He had Garrett's eyes. I stared at the photograph. I could not breathe. The silence in the bookstore was deafening. 2 years old? I managed to choke out. His name is Leo, Elias said softly. Born 26 months ago. Garrett is listed on the birth certificate. A scream built in my throat, but I swallowed it down, tasting bile and ash. Garrett had told me he was infertile. I remembered the nights I had held him while he wept fake tears, telling me how broken he felt because he could not give me a family. I remembered how I had comforted him, how I had suppressed my own desire for children because I did not want to hurt him. I had told him that we were enough, that our work was our legacy. It was all a lie, a cruel, monstrous lie. He was not infertile. He just did not want children with me. He had a whole other life, a secret family playing house in the suburbs while I worked 18 hours a day to fund their lifestyle. That child, that innocent boy, was being raised on my money by the 2 people who were plotting my destruction. I looked up at Elias. The grief in my chest crystallized into something hard and sharp. It felt like a blade. I want everything, I said. My voice was unrecognizable. It was devoid of emotion, stripped of humanity. It was the voice of a machine. I want audio. I want video. I want to know every word they say to each other. I thought you might, Elias said. He reached into a small metal case at his feet and produced 2 devices. This is military grade. We call it the flea. You need to plant one in the OBD2 port of his car. It will look like a standard diagnostic tool. The other is a keylogger injection for his laptop. It bypasses commercial antivirus. Once it is in, it is invisible. It will stream everything to a secure server I have set up for you. I took the devices. They were cold and heavy in my hand. Thank you, Elias. Raina, he said as I stood up, be careful. If they are willing to hide a child for 2 years, they are sociopaths. If they realize you know, they might move from legal assassination to the physical kind. Let them try, I said. They think they are the hunters. They have no idea what they have woken up. That night, the opportunity presented itself with sickening ease. Garrett was in the shower. I could hear the water running, the steam billowing out from the master bath. I moved with the precision of a thief in my own home. I went to his home office. His laptop was on the desk. I inserted the USB injection tool. It took 10 seconds to execute the code. The screen flickered once, then returned to normal. I removed the drive. Then I went down to the garage. I told the staff I needed to retrieve a file from my car. I slipped into the driver's seat of Garrett's pristine sedan. I reached under the dashboard, found the port, and clicked the tracker into place. It blinked green once, then went dark. Active. I was back in the living room, reading a book. By the time Garrett emerged, towel drying his hair, smelling of my expensive soap. Hey, he smiled, leaning down to kiss my cheek. You are working late? Just reading, I said, not looking up. Did you have a good day? Exhausting, he lied. Meetings all day. Go rest, I said. I will be in soon. I waited until he was asleep. Then I went to my private study and opened the secure link Elias had sent me. The audio feed from the car earlier that day was waiting. I put on my noise-canceling headphones, The sound of the car engine hummed. Then, the sound of a phone dialing via Bluetooth. "Hey, it is me." Garrett's voice filled my ears. He sounded stressed. "I am here," a smooth, oily voice answered. I recognized it immediately. It was Marcus Vane, our family lawyer, a man I had invited to Thanksgiving dinners. "Is the paperwork finalized?" Garrett asked. "Almost," Marcus replied. "I have drafted the petition for emergency conservatorship. We are basing the argument on immediate danger to self and assets. The incident report you are going to file about her erratic behavior at the upcoming gala will be the trigger. And the medical history? That is the masterstroke." "Garrett," Marcus chuckled. "I managed to unseal her mother's records from the sanitarium. Paranoid schizophrenia, genetic, hereditary. We will argue that Raina is manifesting the same early onset symptoms. The court will see a pattern. They will not see a CEO. They will see a ticking time bomb that needs to be diffused. You will be granted temporary guardianship within 48 hours of the filing. Once you have that, you can vote her shares by proxy." I paused the recording. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. My mother? They were dragging my mother into this. My mother, who had suffered in silence, who had died alone in a facility because the medicine of her time failed her. I had spent my life building a fortress of logic and success to prove I was not her, to prove I was strong, and they were going to weaponize her tragedy to steal my life. I pressed play again. "We need to move fast," Garrett said. "She is looking sharp lately. I do not know if the pills are working fast enough. She looks at me sometimes, and I feel like she is scanning me." "Relax," Marcus soothed. "Just keep dosing her. Increase it if you have to. We only need to hold it together for 2 more weeks. The annual shareholder meeting is on the 15th. That is the deadline. If she takes the stage and has a breakdown, the board will beg you to take over. You will walk out of that meeting as the chairman of Aegis Dynamics, and she will be on her way to a private facility in Switzerland." "Switzerland," Garrett mused. "That sounds expensive." "It is," Marcus said, "but her trust fund will pay for it, and once she is gone, you and Serafina can finally stop hiding Leo." "God, I miss him," Garrett said, his voice cracking with that fake sentimentality I now despised. "I hate playing this role, Marcus. I hate living with her." 2 weeks. Garrett, just 2 weeks. Then you are free." I took off the headphones. The silence in the room was absolute. 2 weeks. I had 14 days. 14 days before they tried to drag me off a stage in a straitjacket. 14 days before they used my mother's ghost to haunt me. 14 days before they took my company, my money, and my dignity. They had a plan. They had a lawyer. They had a timeline. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They assumed I was the variable in their equation. I was not the variable. I was the architect of the simulation they were trapped in. I looked at the calendar on my desk. The 15th, the shareholder meeting. It was the perfect stage. They wanted a breakdown? They wanted a spectacle? I would give them one, but it would not be the one they wrote. I picked up my phone and sent a secure text to Elias. "Target acquired. The timeline is 14 days. Initiate Phase 2. The Trojan Horse." I closed my laptop. I walked back to the bedroom where my husband slept. I lay down beside him, listening to his steady breathing. I did not sleep. I lay there in the dark, plotting. Every breath he took was a countdown. Every beat of his heart was a second ticking away from his freedom. He wanted to be my guardian? Fine. I would show him exactly what happens when you lock a wolf in a cage and forget to check if the lock holds. The art of losing one's mind is surprisingly technical. It requires a delicate balance between erratic outbursts and hollow silences. If I played it too loud, they would sedate me immediately. If I played it too soft, they would increase the dosage of the poison. I had to inhabit the gray zone, the terrifying space where a brilliant woman begins to fray at the edges. I started on a Tuesday evening. We were in the library, a room lined with first editions that Garrett never read. I was holding a glass of vintage scotch, staring at the fireplace. Garrett was watching me over the rim of his tablet. I could feel his gaze, predatory and assessing. I let the glass slip. It was not a clumsy drop. It was a relaxation of the muscles, a deliberate failure of motor control. The heavy crystal hit the hearth and shattered, sending shards of glass and amber liquid across the Persian rug. Garrett jumped up. "Raina, are you okay?" I stared at the mess, widening my eyes in feigned horror. Then, I looked at my hand as if it belonged to a stranger. "I do not know what happened," I stammered, pitching my voice an octave higher than my usual controlled alto. I was holding it, and then the room tilted. "Garrett, why is the floor moving?" He was at my side in an instant, guiding me away from the glass. "The floor is not moving. Darling, you are just tired. You have been working 18-hour days." "I feel fuzzy," I whispered, leaning my weight against him. "Like there is cotton in my brain. Did I take my medicine? I cannot remember if I took the blue pill." "You did," he soothed, leading me to the leather armchair. "I saw you take it at breakfast. You are just stressed. Shh, just breathe." I buried my face in his chest, hiding the cold smirk that threatened to surface. I could hear his heart rate remain steady. He was not worried about me. He was thrilled. The drugs, or rather, the placebo effect of the drugs he thought I was taking, were finally breaking me. Over the next 3 days, I escalated the performance. I snapped at the housekeeper for moving a vase that had not been touched in years. I forgot the name of my chief financial officer during a breakfast conversation, calling him by my father's name instead. I spent an hour pacing the living room, muttering about encryptions that did not exist. Garrett played the role of the saintly husband to perfection. He canceled his golf games. He brought me tea. He held my hand while I cried about losing my grip on reality. "Maybe it is time to take a step back," he suggested gently on Friday night. We were sitting on the terrace, the city lights of Chicago sprawling below us like a circuit board. "Just for a little while, until you feel like yourself again." "I cannot," I said, wringing my hands. "The company, the shareholders, they need me." "They need you healthy," he countered. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "I spoke to Marcus. He drafted a temporary power of attorney. It just allows me to handle the day-to-day operations. Signing checks, approving minor contracts. It would take the weight off your shoulders. You could rest. Raina, really rest." I looked at the paper. It was the death warrant for my career. If I signed this, he would have legal precedence. "I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. "It feels like giving up." "It is not giving up," he urged, his voice dipping into a hypnotic cadence. "It is trusting your partner. Let me carry the load for a few weeks. We can announce it at the 10th anniversary gala next week. You can make a speech. Tell everyone you are taking a sabbatical to focus on family. It will look dignified." I looked into his eyes. They were blue, clear, and utterly soulless. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay. Garrett, you are right. I am so tired." "We will do it at the gala," he said, suppressing a smile. "It will be a celebration of our partnership." He thought he had won. He thought the fortress had fallen. But while Raina the wife was crumbling, Raina the CEO was executing the most aggressive financial maneuver of her career. That night, while Garrett slept the sleep of the victorious, I went to my secure terminal. I did not use the keyboard. I used a direct neural interface headset I was beta testing, ensuring no keystrokes could be logged by the spyware I knew he had eventually installed on my work laptop as well. I began the exodus. My wealth was not just in Aegis stock. I had nearly $80 million in liquid assets, bonds, and private equity holdings. I initiated a series of transfers using a blind trust structure I had set up years ago for humanitarian aid. The money moved through a labyrinth of digital tunnels, from Chicago to a server in Reykjavik, then bounced to Singapore, and finally settling in a numbered account in the Cayman Islands. The account was locked with a triple-blind biometric key: my voice, my retina, and a specific sequence of heartbeats that could not be forged. By 4 in the morning, my personal accounts in the United States held less than $50,000. If Garrett tried to access my funds tomorrow, he would find the vaults empty, but the system would show a pending audit status for 48 hours, buying me enough time until the gala. But emptying the accounts was just defense. I needed offense. I needed a trap so shiny, so irresistible, that it would make them reckless. I created Project Chimera. I spent the next 2 days building a ghost. I created a partitioned sector on the Aegis servers, accessible only with high-level clearance. Inside, I planted files, white papers, and simulated test results for an artificial intelligence named Chimera. The documentation described Chimera as a predictive quantum algorithm capable of breaking any encryption in existence within 6 seconds. It was the holy grail of cyber warfare. It was worth billions. Governments would kill for it. The only problem was that Chimera did not exist. The code was a shell, millions of lines of gibberish wrapped in a sophisticated user interface that looked terrifyingly real. I needed Serafina to see it. On Sunday, Serafina came over for lunch. I made sure to leave my secure tablet on the coffee table, the screen unlocked, displaying the Project Chimera executive summary. "I have to go take my pill," I said, standing up abruptly and feigning a dizzy spell. "I will be right back. Do not touch anything. Sarah, that is highly classified." I walked to the bathroom, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. I checked the hidden camera feed on my phone. Serafina did not even wait for me to close the door. She lunged for the tablet. Her eyes scanned the screen, widening with every line she read. She pulled out her own phone and began snapping pictures of the documents. I smiled at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The greed in her eyes was brighter than the diamonds she wanted to buy. She had no idea what a quantum algorithm was, but she understood the projected valuation figure I had conveniently highlighted: $4.5 billion. I flushed the toilet and walked back out. Serafina jumped, sliding the tablet back onto the table. "Are you okay?" she asked. Her face flushed. "Just a headache," I murmured. "Garrett says I need to rest." "Yes," she said, her voice distracted. "You should rest. You should rest for a long time." The reaction was immediate. Later that afternoon, I sat in my car, parked 3 blocks away from the house, listening to the audio feed from the bug I had planted in Garrett's sedan. He had picked Serafina up to discuss her gallery opening. "Did you see it?" Serafina's voice was shrill, bordering on hysterical. "Garrett, did you see the file I sent you?" "I saw it." Garrett's voice was grim. "Project Chimera. I have heard rumors about it in the RD labs. But I thought it was just a theory. If this is real, if she actually built a quantum breaker." "It says it is worth $4 billion, Serafina screamed. $4 billion. Garrett, if we commit her tomorrow, does the power of attorney cover intellectual property that is not yet patented?" "It should," Garrett said, but he sounded uncertain. "But if it is classified defense tech, the government might seize it if the CEO is declared mentally unstable. They might invoke the National Security Act." "No," Serafina snapped. "We cannot let the government take it. We need to own it, personally. Before you sign those papers to lock her up, we need to transfer Chimera to Blue Heron Holdings. We cannot just transfer a quantum AI. Sarah," Garrett argued, his voice rising, "it is not a painting. It is millions of lines of code. I need the source key, and only Reina has the source key." "Then get it from her," she hissed. "She is drooling on herself half the time. Manipulate her. Trick her. I don't care what you do. But if we send her to the asylum before we get that code, we lose the billions. We just get the company scraps." "You are getting greedy," Garrett warned. "We stick to the plan. We take the company first." "Screw the company," Serafina yelled. "The company has shareholders. The company has a board. Chimera is a golden ticket. I want that code. Garrett, if you do not get it, I will find someone who can." "What is that supposed to mean?" Garrett's voice dropped, cold and dangerous. It means I am not walking away with just half of a trust fund, she said. I found the documents. Garrett, I am the one doing the heavy lifting here. Pretending to be the doting cousin while you play the grieving husband. I deserve Chimera. You deserve what I give you, Garrett snarled. I listened to the silence that followed. It was thick with tension. The alliance was fracturing. Serafina's greed was outpacing Garrett's caution. She was willing to risk the entire insanity narrative to get her hands on the imaginary billions. I drove back to the penthouse, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. They were fighting over a ghost, and in their scramble to catch the smoke, they were going to burn the house down. When I got home, Garrett was waiting for me. He looked haggard. He poured me a glass of water and held out a blue pill. Here, darling, he said, for your nerves. I took it. I pretended to swallow. Garrett, I said softly, looking up at him with wide, trusting eyes. I have been thinking about what you said, about the gala. I wrote a speech. Do you want to hear it? Not now. Raina, he said, pacing the room. He stopped and looked at me. Raina, tell me about Chimera. I blinked, feigning confusion. Chimera? That is just a myth, a story I tell the junior engineers. Do not lie to me, he said, his voice sharpening. I saw the files on your tablet. Is it finished? I shrank back into the sofa, playing the frightened animal. It is dangerous, Garrett. It can open any door. It can see everything. Where is the key, Raina? He asked, stepping closer. He sat on the coffee table, invading my personal space. If you are sick, we need to protect that technology. We cannot let it fall into the wrong hands. Give me the access key so I can secure it in the vault. I looked at him. I saw the desperation. He was breaking his own script. He was supposed to be soothing me, not interrogating me. Serafina had gotten to him. I keep it in my head, I whispered, tapping my temple. But it is getting foggy. I'm forgetting the numbers. Garrett, the medicine makes the numbers go away. Panic flared in his eyes. If I forgot the key, the billions vanished. Think, Raina, he urged, grabbing my shoulders. Write it down, for safety. Write it down before you forget. I will try, I sobbed. I will try to remember it before the gala. I will give it to you on stage, as a gift, a parting gift before I go away. He relaxed. He kissed my forehead, but his lips felt like dry paper. Good girl, he said. You do that. You give me the key at the gala, and then you can rest forever. I watched him walk away. He pulled out his phone, likely to text Serafina that he had secured the asset. He had no idea. I was not going to give him a key. I was going to hand him a live grenade, and he was going to pull the pin on national television. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, I just had to wait for the curtain to rise. The shadowy corners of the Union League Club had witnessed a century of Chicago's power brokers making deals. But none were quite like the one I was about to broker. I sat in the private library, a room smelling of aged leather and cigar smoke, waiting for the three men who held the fate of my company in their hands. I had arrived early, discarding the fragile wife costume I wore at the penthouse. Here, I was in a tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back into a severe knot. When the heavy oak doors opened, Silas Thorne, the chairman of the board, walked in, followed by the chief financial officer and the head of legal. These were men who had served with my father. They were traditionalists. They valued loyalty above profit, and honor above all. Raina, Silas said, his voice grave. This meeting is highly irregular. Your husband tells us you are unwell. He says you are suffering from episodes. My husband, I said, my voice steady and cold as liquid nitrogen, is a liar, and he is a thief. I did not waste time with emotional appeals. I knew my audience. These men did not care about broken hearts. They cared about broken ledgers. I slid a thick dossier across the mahogany table. It contained the evidence Elias and I had gathered. The transfer of the retinal scanning patents to Blue Heron Holdings, The diversion of operational funds to shell companies in Delaware, and the unauthorized sale of our proprietary encryption keys to a competitor in Shenzhen. Silas opened the folder. I watched his face transform. The skepticism vanished, replaced by a dark, simmering rage. He adjusted his spectacles, reading the transaction logs I had flagged. "He sold the biometric protocol?" Silas whispered, looking up at me. "That is the backbone of our government contracts. If the Department of Defense finds out we leaked this, they will cancel our clearance," I finished for him. "Aegis Dynamics will be bankrupt in 6 months. Garrett does not care. He plans to strip the assets, sell the remains, and vanish with the capital before the investigation starts." The head of legal slammed his fist on the table. "This is corporate espionage. We should have him arrested tonight." "No," I commanded, raising a hand. "If you arrest him now, the scandal will tank our stock price. The market hates instability. We need to control the narrative." "What do you propose?" Silas asked, leaning forward. "I need you to let him think he has won," I said. "He is going to petition for emergency guardianship at the 10th anniversary gala. He expects the board to support him when he claims I am mentally unfit. I need you to nod. I need you to smile. I need you to shake his hand." "You want us to help him coup you?" the CFO asked, incredulous. "I want you to lure him onto the stage," I corrected. "I want him to feel so safe, so supported, that he signs the final documents in front of the cameras. Once he signs, I will drop the guillotine. But I need your silence until that moment. Can I count on you?" Silas looked at the other two. They exchanged a silent nod. He turned back to me, a glint of admiration in his eyes that I had not seen since my father died. "We are with you. Raina, bury him." Step 1 was complete. I left the club through the service entrance, slipping back into the shadows. My next stop was less dignified. I drove my rental car, a nondescript sedan paid for with cash, to the private clinic of Dr. Aris. It was 9 in the evening. The clinic was closed. But I knew he was there. Elias had hacked his schedule. I picked the lock on the back door. It was a simple tumbler mechanism. Insulting, really, for a man who charged $500 for a consultation. I walked down the sterile hallway and opened the door to his office. Dr. Aris was counting cash at his desk. Stacks of $100 bills were neat little towers on the blotting paper. He jumped when I entered, knocking a stack over. "Mrs. Whitmore," he gasped, scrambling to cover the money with a medical journal. "I did not have an appointment listed. You should be resting." I walked over to the chair opposite him and sat down. I did not look at the money. I looked at him. "I had the blue pill analyzed, doctor," I said softly. His face went gray. "I do not know what you mean. It is a standard vitamin compound." "It is scopolamine and haloperidol," I countered. "Prescribing antipsychotics to a healthy patient to induce a psychotic break is a Class A felony. It carries a minimum sentence of 20 years. And that is before we add the charges for medical malpractice, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." I pulled a single sheet of paper from my bag. It was a prepared confession, detailing his agreement with Garrett to drug me. "I am not going to prison," he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Garrett said it was safe. He said you were unstable anyway." "Garrett lied," I said. "Here are your options. Option A. I call the medical board and the FBI right now. You lose your license, your freedom, and this lovely clinic. Option B. You work for me." He looked at the phone in my hand, then at the confession. He slumped in his chair, defeated. "What do you want?" "You are going to call Garrett," I instructed. "You are going to tell him that my condition is deteriorating faster than expected. You will tell him that the hallucinations are becoming violent and that I am a danger to myself. You need to create urgency. Make him believe he has to act at the gala, or he risks losing control of me completely. He will ask for a higher dosage." "Doctor," Aris said weakly. "Agree to it," I said. "But you will give him sugar pills from now on. I need to be sharp for the finale. But he needs to think I am drowning." "Doctor." Aris nodded. his hands shaking as he reached for the phone. I watched him make the call. I listened as he lied to my husband, painting a picture of a woman on the edge of the abyss. It was a convincing performance. Fear is an excellent motivator. When I returned to the penthouse, the silence was heavy. Garrett was out, likely celebrating his impending victory with Serafina. I went to my study and began the final phase of the legal trap. I drafted a new set of documents. To the untrained eye, they looked exactly like the guardianship papers Garrett's lawyer had prepared. They used the same font, the same headers, the same legal jargon, but tucked deep within the subclauses on page 42 was a poison pill provision. In corporate law, a poison pill is a tactic used to discourage hostile takeovers. My version was more personal. The clause stated that by accepting guardianship of Raina Whitmore and her estate, the guardian also accepted full personal liability for the debts of Project Chimera. I had spent the last 24 hours creating a paper trail of debt for this fake project. Loans from offshore entities, which I controlled, totaling $200 million. If Garrett signed these papers, he wouldn't just be taking control of my company. He would be instantly assuming $200 million in debt. The moment his signature hit the paper, his personal assets, his hidden accounts, and everything he had stolen would be seized to pay back the investors. He would be destitute before the ink dried. I printed the documents and swapped them with the ones in his briefcase. He would never read them. He was too arrogant. He thought I was too broken to fight back. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place at 2 a.m. I was sitting in the dark, monitoring the data stream from the keylogger I had installed on Garrett's laptop. He had logged into a cloud storage account I hadn't seen before. It wasn't Dropbox or Google Drive. It was a private server hosted in Panama, protected by a dual-layer password. But thanks to the keylogger, I had his keystrokes. Password: Serafina Forever, 2023. I felt a surge of nausea at the password, but I typed it into my own secure terminal. The server opened. I was expecting financial records, maybe some emails. What I found was a digital graveyard of my marriage. It was not just recent. The folder dates went back 3 years, 2 years before the affair supposedly started. I opened the first folder. It was titled The Mark. Inside were photos of me. Candid photos taken from a distance before I even met Garrett. Photos of me entering my office. Photos of me at coffee shops. Notes on my schedule. My habits. My insecurities. Target is isolated. One note read in Garrett's handwriting: craves family connection, vulnerable to acts of service. They hadn't just fallen in love behind my back. They had targeted me. Garrett had courted me as a job. The romance, the wedding, the vows. It was all a long con operation designed by him and Serafina to infiltrate my life. I clicked on another folder. Leo. Videos played. A baby taking his first steps. Garrett holding him up, beaming with a pride he never showed me. Serafina laughing in the background. Say Dada. Garrett cooed in the video. Say Dada is going to get us a big house. Dada is going to be rich. Serafina's voice chimed in from behind the camera. As soon as the Ice Queen melts. I froze the video. The Ice Queen. That was their name for me. I downloaded everything. Every picture. Every video, every hateful text message where they mocked my clothes, my laugh, my work. I downloaded the diary entries where Serafina complained about having to wait so long for me to crack. I sat there for a long time, the glow of the screen illuminating the tears that finally fell. They weren't tears of sadness anymore. They were tears of mourning for the woman I used to be. That naive, trusting woman was dead. Garrett and Serafina had killed her. But in her place stood something else. I wiped my face. I backed up the files to 3 separate secure servers. I sent a copy to Elias. I looked at the sleeping form of my husband on the monitor feed from the bedroom. He looked so peaceful. He thought he was the protagonist of this story. He thought he was the clever wolf eating the sheep. He did not realize that the sheep was gone. I turned off the screen. The evidence was gathered. The allies were in place. The trap was armed. Tomorrow was the gala. Tomorrow. The lights would go up. And I would show the world exactly what happens when you try to burn a witch who was born in the fire. The architecture of a conspiracy is a fragile thing. It relies entirely on the structural integrity of trust between the conspirators. Garrett and Serafina believed they were building an empire on the foundation of my destruction, but they had forgotten that their alliance was born of greed, and greed is a solitary vice, to destroy them. I did not need to fire a single shot. I simply had to introduce a variable that made them question who would get the bigger slice of the carcass. I sat in my private command center, a small, soundproofed server room hidden behind a false wall in my walk-in closet. It was Tuesday, 3 days before the gala. The house was quiet. Garrett was at the gym, maintaining the physique of a trophy husband, and Serafina was supposedly at her studio. I picked up a burner phone, a cheap plastic device I had bought with cash at a convenience store 3 towns over. I had already prepared the digital stage. Using the backdoor access Elias and I had established on Garrett's phone, I had remotely injected a fake text conversation into his encrypted messaging app. I created a contact named Vanessa, a non-existent woman, a phantom mistress. In this fabricated chat history, Garrett complained about Serafina. He called her clingy. He called her a useful idiot. He wrote that once he had the power of attorney over me, he would cut Serafina a check for $50,000 and vanish to the Cayman Islands with Vanessa. It was a cruel script, but it was exactly the kind of betrayal Serafina subconsciously feared. She knew Garrett was a snake because she was sleeping with him. She knew how easily he lied to me. It was only a matter of time before she wondered when he would lie to her. I sent the first text to Serafina's personal cell phone. "You think you are the only one? He is playing you. Sweetie, ask him about the flight to Zurich. 1 ticket, not 2. Attached to the message was a doctored screenshot of a flight itinerary. It showed a one-way first-class ticket to Zurich in Garrett's name. Departing the morning after the gala, I watched on the monitors as Serafina received the text. She was not at her studio. She was in my guest room. Rummaging through my jewelry box, I saw her phone light up. She glanced at it, froze, and then dropped the diamond necklace she was holding. She read the message. I saw her face drain of color. Her hands began to tremble. She dialed Garrett immediately, but he did not answer. I had temporarily disabled his ringer remotely. Panic is a powerful accelerant. Serafina paced the room, her fingernails digging into her palms. She needed proof. She needed to know if the Vanessa text was real. 2 hours later, Garrett returned home. He looked flushed and healthy, the picture of vitality. He tossed his gym bag on the floor and went to shower. He left his phone on the kitchen island. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at a switched-off television, playing the role of the catatonic wife. "Hey, honey," Garrett called out as he headed to the bathroom. "I am going to hop in the shower. Do not answer the phone if it rings. It is just work." I nodded slowly, not looking at him. The moment the bathroom door clicked shut, Serafina emerged from the hallway. She moved like a phantom. She did not even look at me. To her, I was furniture. She went straight for the phone. She knew his passcode. Of course she did. I watched her through my eyelashes. My head lolled to the side on the sofa cushions. She unlocked the phone. Her fingers flew across the screen. She found the encrypted app. She found the Vanessa thread. I saw her eyes widen. I saw her read the messages I had planted. Garrett. She is getting annoying. Serafina thinks she is a partner. She is just the getaway driver. Once Raina signs the papers, I am done with her. Vanessa. Just make sure you bring the money. I do not want to deal with your crazy cousin. Garrett. Do not worry. The accounts are ready. Just you and me. Baby. Zurich. Serafina made a sound. A choked, wounded noise like an animal caught in a trap. She looked at the bathroom door, her expression morphing from shock to pure, unadulterated hatred. She put the phone down exactly where she found it. She looked at me. For the first time in months, her eyes held something other than pity or contempt. She looked at me with calculation. "Raina?" she whispered. I did not respond. I just blinked, staring at the empty air. "You poor, stupid cow," she muttered, but the venom was gone. He is going to kill us both. She turned and ran out of the apartment. I waited 5 minutes, then I sent the next salvo. This one was for Garrett. I used a different burner number, one with a spoofed area code from a known corporate espionage hub in Silicon Valley. Mr. Whitmore, we have received an interesting offer from a Miss Serafina concerning the Chimera source code. We assume she is acting on your behalf? If not, perhaps we should discuss the price of loyalty. I monitored Garrett's reaction when he came out of the shower. He checked his phone. He read the text. He did not panic like Serafina. He went still. It was the stillness of a predator realizing there is another predator in the tall grass. He looked around the penthouse. He walked into the living room and stared at me. "Has Serafina been here?" he asked, his voice tight. "Sarah?" I mumbled, looking confused. "I think so. She was looking for jewelry." "Jewelry," Garrett repeated. He clenched his jaw. "Right." He dialed Serafina. She did not answer. The seed was planted. Now, I just had to water it. The next day, Wednesday, the tension in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. Garrett and Serafina were in the same room, but they stood on opposite sides, like boxers waiting for the bell. "You seemed distracted yesterday," Garrett said, pouring himself a drink. It was only 11 in the morning. "I had a migraine," Serafina lied. She was clutching her oversized handbag tight against her chest. "Garrett, about the gala. Are you sure everything is ready? The transfer?" "It is handled," Garrett said, eyeing her suspiciously. "Why? Are you worried about your cut?" "I just want to make sure we are secure," she said. "I mean, what if something goes wrong? What if the board blocks it?" "They won't," Garrett snapped, "unless someone gives them a reason to." "What is that supposed to mean?" Serafina shot back. "It means do not do anything stupid, Sarah," he warned. I sat between them at the dining table, slowly tearing a croissant into tiny pieces. "The birds," I whispered to no one. "The birds are flying south." They both ignored me. "I am going to the office," Garrett announced abruptly. "I need to check the secure servers." "I will stay here with Raina," Serafina said quickly. "Make sure she takes her meds." "Fine," Garrett said. He grabbed his keys and left, the moment the elevator doors closed. Serafina moved. She did not come to comfort me. She went straight to my home office. I stayed in my chair for a moment, smiling. Then I pulled out my tablet to watch the feed from the office camera. Serafina was at my desk. She had brought a high-capacity external hard drive. She plugged it into my desktop computer. She didn't know the passwords, but she didn't need to. I had left the Project Chimera partition unprotected. Specifically for this moment, it was a honeypot. She found the folder. Project Chimera. Source code. Do not copy. She clicked drag and drop. A progress bar appeared on the screen. Copying files. Time remaining. 20 minutes. She sat there, tapping her foot nervously, checking the door every 30 seconds. She was sweating. She was terrified. But she was determined. She believed that Garrett was going to leave her with nothing. So she was taking the $4 billion insurance policy. She had no idea that what she was copying was not a revolutionary AI. It was a digital plague. The files were tagged with a tracer. The moment she plugged that drive into any other network, it would ping the FBI's cyber division with her location and IP address. Furthermore, the act of copying these specific files was a federal crime, theft of trade secrets, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. I watched her commit a felony in high definition. I recorded it, I saved it, I backed it up. When the transfer was complete, she yanked the drive out and shoved it into her bra. She looked at the computer screen, wiped her fingerprints off the mouse with her sleeve, and hurried out of the room. She walked back into the dining room, looking breathless. "Raina," she said, her voice shaking. "I have to go. I have an appointment." "Okay, Sarah," I said, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "Will you come back? I don't like being alone." "I will see you at the gala," she said. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw a flicker of guilt. I am sorry. Reina, I really am, but I have to look out for myself. We all do, I said softly. She did not hear me. She was already out the door. Garrett returned an hour later. He was furious. He marched into the living room. "Where is she?" he demanded. "She left," I said. "She said she had an appointment." Garrett looked at his phone. He looked at me. "Did she go into the office, Reina? Did you see her go into the office?" "I don't know," I whimpered, shrinking back. "I was watching the birds. Garrett, why are you yelling?" He ran to the office. I heard him typing furiously. He was checking the access logs. He came back out, his face pale. He knew someone had accessed the Chimera files, but because Serafina had used my logged-in session, it looked like I had accessed them. But he knew I was incapable. He knew it was her. "That bitch," he whispered. "She is trying to leverage me." He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "She thinks she can sell it out from under me. She thinks she can outsmart me." He looked at me. The mask of the loving husband was slipping. He looked dangerous. "Reina," he said, walking over and kneeling in front of me. "Reina, listen to me carefully. Serafina is not your friend. Do you understand? She is bad. She wants to hurt us." "Sarah is nice," I said stubbornly, clinging to my role. "She likes my paintings." "She is a thief," Garrett shouted. Losing control, he grabbed my wrists. "She is trying to steal our future. But do not worry. I am going to fix it. We are going to go to that gala tomorrow, and we are going to end this. Once I have that signature. She is nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing." I looked at him, letting a single tear roll down my cheek. "You are hurting me." "Garrett." He let go. Standing up and smoothing his suit jacket, he took a deep breath, composing himself. "I am sorry," he said, though his eyes were cold. "I am just protective. I love you. Reina, I am doing this for us." "I know," I lied. "I love you too." That night, they did not sleep together. Serafina stayed at her studio, probably meeting with the buyer she thought she had found. Garrett slept in the guest room, his phone clutched in his hand like a weapon. I lay in the master bedroom, the only one in the triangular relationship who was sleeping soundly. The paranoia had taken root. They were no longer a team. They were two scorpions in a bottle, circling each other, stingers raised, waiting for the other to strike. They were so focused on each other that they had forgotten about the glass wall of the bottle, and they had forgotten who was holding it. Tomorrow was the gala. The stage was set. The players were in position. The script was written. All that was left was to turn on the spotlight and watch them burn. The air in the dining room was not just cold, it was brittle. It felt as though if someone were to drop a fork, the very oxygen around us would shatter like tempered glass. I had insisted on this dinner. I told Garrett that I wanted one last moment of peace, a family meal, before the chaos of the 10th anniversary gala. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Garrett sat to my right, and Serafina to my left. The seating arrangement was deliberate. It placed them in my peripheral vision simultaneously, allowing me to watch the invisible threads of tension that connected and strangled them. The meal was roasted duck with a cherry reduction, a dish that required a sharp knife to eat. I watched Garrett slice into the meat. His movements were precise, aggressive. He was angry. He was still reeling from the suspected betrayal regarding the Chimera files, but he had to play the loving husband for one more night. Serafina, on the other hand, was vibrating with a nervous energy that she tried to mask with excessive wine consumption. She had stolen the billions yesterday, and she was likely wondering why the FBI had not kicked down the door yet. She did not know the timer was set for tomorrow. "This is delicious." "Reina," Serafina said, her voice too loud in the cavernous room. "Did you cook this?" "The chef prepared it," I said softly, staring at the candle flame flickering in the center of the table. "But I chose the menu." "I wanted something bloody." Garrett paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, searching for double meanings. "You are in a mood tonight," he said. forcing a smile. I am reflective, I replied. I took a sip of water. I have been thinking about stories. Do you remember the fables Father used to read to us? Sarah? Not really, she muttered, taking a large gulp of Pinot Noir. I was always bored by them. I remember one, I continued, my voice taking on a distant, dreamlike quality. It was about a blind eagle. The eagle was the ruler of the sky, but as it grew old, it lost its sight. It relied on two crows to be its eyes. The crows told the eagle where the prey was. They told the eagle where the cliffs were. I looked directly at Garrett. He was staring at me, his eyes cold. But the crows got hungry, I said, and they realized that the eagle was too big to eat while it was alive. So they started guiding it, a little to the left, a little to the right, closer and closer to the mountain peak. They wanted the eagle to crash. They wanted to feast on the carcass. That is a morbid story, Serafina said, shivering. Why are you telling us this? Because of the ending, I said, smiling faintly. The crows forgot that even a blind eagle can hear the wind, and just before they hit the mountain, the eagle grabbed the crows, and they all went down together. Silence descended on the table. It was heavy, suffocating. Garrett placed his knife and fork down slowly. Raina, he said, his tone patronizing. I think the medication is making you paranoid. There are no crows here, just family. Family, I repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. Yes, that is why I wanted to tell you both something. Something I did today. Garrett's posture stiffened. What did you do today? You were supposed to be resting. I had a moment of clarity, I lied. I realize that you are right. Garrett, I am sick. I am losing my grip. And if I am declared incompetent tomorrow, if the court gives you control over everything I need to make sure my soul is at peace, we will take care of everything, Serafina said quickly, her eyes gleaming with greed. I know, I said, but I wanted to be sure. So, I called Marcus. I had him make a small amendment to my will and the trust structure. Garrett's eyes narrowed. You changed your will? Raina, you are not in a state to sign legal documents. We can contest that. Oh, it is nothing major. I waved my hand dismissively. I just added a purity clause. It is a standard safeguard. Since I have so much money, and since I might be locked away, I wanted to ensure that whoever becomes my guardian is doing it for love, not money. What does the clause say? Garrett asked. His voice was very quiet. It says that if I am declared mentally incompetent, all my assets, the company shares, the real estate, the liquid cash, will be held in escrow for 6 months, I explained, watching their faces closely. During those 6 months, the designated guardian must submit to a forensic financial audit, a complete audit, every bank account, every email, every shell company. If the auditors find even $1 of unaccounted income or one suspicious transfer, the guardianship is voided. I paused for effect. And if it is voided, I finished, 100% of my estate is immediately liquidated and donated to the Chicago Shelter for Stray Cats and Dogs. The sound of Serafina's wine glass hitting the table was the only noise in the room. She had missed the coaster. Red wine bled onto the white tablecloth like a fresh wound. Garrett's face had gone the color of ash. You did what? He stammered. It is beautiful, isn't it? I asked innocently. It protects you, Garrett. It proves to the world that you are honest. Since you have nothing to hide, the audit will be a breeze. You will get control in 6 months, unless you have something to hide. I looked at him with wide, trusting eyes. He could not speak. He knew. He knew about the money laundering. He knew about the transfers to Serafina. He knew about the hidden accounts. A forensic audit would not just strip him of the guardianship, it would send him to federal prison for 20 years. The insanity plea plan was dead. If they declared me crazy, the clause triggered. The audit started. They lost everything. I need some air, Garrett said. Standing up abruptly, his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Garrett? Serafina asked, her voice high and panicked. I said I need air, he snapped. He stormed out toward the terrace. I think I will go to bed, I said, standing up slowly. I am suddenly very tired. The doctor said these pills make me sleepy. I walked out of the dining room, leaving Serafina sitting alone with the spilled wine and the ruin of her dreams. I went to the master bedroom. I changed into my silk pajamas. I turned off the lights. I climbed into bed and pulled the duvet up to my chin. But I did not sleep. I reached under the mattress and pulled out a small specialized tablet. It was linked to the hidden microphones I had installed in the living room lamps and the terrace planters. I put on my headphones. For 20 minutes. There was only silence on the feed. Then, the sound of the terrace door opening. Footsteps. Heavy, pacing footsteps. She knows, Serafina's voice came through the feed. She was crying. Garrett, she knows. The crows? The audit? She is playing us. Shut up, Garrett hissed. She does not know. She is crazy. That clause is just her paranoid brain trying to control things. It does not matter if she is crazy or not, Serafina screamed in a whisper. If that clause is legal, we are dead. We cannot pass an audit. Garrett, I have a stolen AI on a hard drive, and you have $3 million of embezzled funds in Delaware. If they look at our accounts, we go to jail. I know, Garrett roared. Then he lowered his voice. I know. Okay, calm down. We just cannot use the insanity route. We cannot let the clause trigger. So what do we do? Serafina asked. Walk away? Leave the billions on the table? No, Garrett said. The tone of his voice changed. It became flat, dead. We cannot walk away. We are too deep in. If she stays in power, she will eventually find the discrepancies anyway. She is the CEO. She will look at the books one day. So, there is no version of this where Raina Whitmore lives and we stay free, Garrett said. I stopped breathing. My hand gripped the tablet so tight my knuckles turned white. What are you saying? Serafina asked. Her crying had stopped. The gala is tomorrow, Garrett said. His voice was calculating now, the voice of a man solving a business problem. We stick to the transfer, but we do not use the power of attorney. We make her sign a direct transfer of assets, a gift, an unconditional gift to her husband. She won't sign that, Serafina argued. She will, Garrett said. I have upped her dosage of the hallucinogens. By tomorrow night, she will not know what she is signing. I will tell her it is a donation to a charity. She will sign it, and once the assets are in my name, the audit clause does not matter, because the will only matters if she dies or is declared incompetent. But she is still here, Serafina pointed out. She can revoke a gift. Not if she has a tragic accident, Garrett said. The silence on the recording lasted for 10 seconds. It felt like 10 years. An accident? Serafina whispered. She has been unstable, Garrett said, building the narrative as he spoke. Everyone knows it. Doctor, Aris will testify to it. She is erratic. She is clumsy. The penthouse has a very high balcony. Or maybe she takes too many of her pills. A suicide, overwhelmed by the pressure of the company. Suicide, Serafina tested the word. If she commits suicide, the will is executed. The charity gets the money. Not if she transfers the assets before she dies, Garrett corrected. That is why she has to sign at the gala. We get the signature at 8 o'clock. We take her home at 9. By 10 she is gone. We call the police. We cry. We show them the medical records. The grieving husband inherits what she gave him. No audit. No questions. Can you do it? Serafina asked. Can you actually kill her? She is already dead. Sarah, Garrett said coldly. She died the moment she started checking those accounts. It is her or us. Do you want to go to prison? Do you want to give birth to your next kid in a cell? No, Serafina said immediately. No, let's do it. Tomorrow then, Garrett said. Act normal. Get the signature. Then I will handle the rest. I took the headphones off. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. I was shaking from the sheer adrenaline of victory. I had it. I had the conspiracy to commit murder. This was not white-collar crime anymore. This was not a civil dispute over assets. This was a capital offense. This was life in prison without parole. I saved the recording. I uploaded it to the cloud. I sent a copy to Elias with a 3-word message. Code red. Executed. I lay back on the pillows. I stared at the ceiling of the bedroom I had shared with this man for 5 years. I thought about the mornings we had woken up together, the vacations we had taken, the dreams we had discussed. It was all smoke. There was no husband. There was only a man who was willing to push me off a balcony to avoid an audit. I closed my eyes, but I did not sleep. I visualized the gala. I visualized the stage. I visualized the look on his face when the trap snapped shut. He wanted a tragedy? I would give him a tragedy, but it would be a Greek tragedy, where the hero's hubris is the instrument of their own destruction. Sleep well, Garrett, I whispered into the darkness. You are going to need your strength. Tomorrow, I would not just be fighting for my company. I would be fighting for my life, and I had brought a gun to a knife fight. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. A fitting belly for the beast that was Chicago high society. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, roasted lamb, and the metallic tang of ambition. 500 of the most powerful people in the Western Hemisphere were seated at round tables, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the chandeliers and the harsh flashbulbs of the paparazzi. They were here to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Aegis Dynamics. They were here to toast the future of security. They had no idea they were attending a public execution. I stood at the edge of the velvet curtains, my hand gripping Garrett's arm. To the casual observer, I was a fragile woman leaning on her husband for support. In reality, I was an anchor dragging him down, and he just did not know it yet. You are shaking, Garrett whispered, his lips brushing my ear. It looked like a kiss. It felt like a threat. Pull it together, Raina. You just have to walk out there, say the 3 lines we practiced, and sign the donation papers. Then we can go home. I have your medicine ready in the car. I am scared. Garrett, I stammered, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. I adjusted the shawl around my shoulders, hiding the fact that my muscles were coiled like steel springs. There are so many people. What if I forget the words? You won't, he said, his fingers digging into my bicep, hard enough to bruise. I will be right there holding you. Just focus on me. Do it for us. Do it so you can rest. I looked past him into the wings. Serafina was standing there, dressed in a shimmering silver gown that cost more than her alleged annual income. She was clutching a black leather portfolio. Inside were the transfer documents that would gift my entire estate to Garrett. She caught my eye and offered a tight, encouraging smile, the kind a butcher gives a lamb before the hammer falls. She tapped the portfolio, a silent signal. Sign the papers. Get in the car. Die. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed through the hall, reverberating off the frescoed ceiling. Please welcome the CEO of Aegis Dynamics, Raina Whitmore, and her husband, Chief Financial Officer Garrett Whitmore. The applause was polite but hesitant. Rumors of my instability had been circulating for weeks. Planted efficiently by Dr. Aris and Marcus, they were not clapping for a leader. They were clapping out of morbid curiosity. They wanted to see the crack in the armor. Garrett guided me onto the stage. The lights were blinding. I stumbled slightly, a calculated misstep, and a ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Garrett caught me, playing the hero, expertly positioning us at the podium. Steady, he murmured, flashing his charming, reassuring smile to the cameras. He adjusted the microphone for me. I gripped the sides of the podium. My hands were trembling. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw Silas Thorne at the front table, his face impassive, waiting for my signal. I saw the sharks from Wall Street, wondering if they should short my stock in the morning. Good evening, I whispered into the microphone. My voice cracked. I looked at Garrett in panic. He nodded, urging me on. I am not feeling very well tonight, I continued, playing the role of the broken doll. My wonderful husband has been my rock. I don't know where I would be without him. Garrett beamed, placing a hand on the small of my back. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold pen. He signaled to Serafina. She stepped out from the wings, walking onto the stage with the portfolio. The crowd watched, confused. This was not on the program. Tonight, I said, my voice gaining a little more strength. I was supposed to announce my retirement. I was supposed to sign over my life's work to Garrett, because I have been told that I am sick, that I can no longer distinguish truth from fiction. Serafina opened the portfolio on the podium. The documents were there. The gift deed that would bypass the audit clause. Garrett uncapped the pen and pressed it into my hand. Just sign here, darling, he whispered, blocking the microphone with his body so only I could hear. Then it is all over. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the crowd. I dropped the pen. It clattered against the wooden stage, the sound amplified by the microphone like a gunshot. I stood up straight. The tremble in my hands vanished. The slump in my shoulders disappeared. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air of the ballroom, and when I exhaled, the ghost of the weak wife left my body. I looked directly into the camera lens broadcasting live to the business news networks. But I realized something today, I said. My voice was no longer a whisper. It was the voice that had negotiated billion-dollar contracts. It was the voice that commanded 5,000 employees. It rang out clear, authoritative, and terrifyingly calm. I realized that the problem with lies is that they leave a digital footprint, and at Aegis Dynamics, we specialize in tracking footprints. Garrett froze. His hand was still on my back, but it had turned to stone. He looked at me, confusion clouding his eyes. He had not processed the shift yet. I am not retiring, I announced, my voice booming. And I am certainly not sick. Tonight, instead of a resignation, I am here to unveil our newest technology. We call it Veritas. I stepped away from the podium, leaving Garrett and Serafina stranded near the documents. I clicked a small remote I had concealed in my palm. The massive LED screen behind us, which had been displaying the company logo, went black. Veritas is an algorithmic auditing system, I explained. Walking the stage with the predatory grace of a panther, it does not just look at numbers, it looks at behavior. It correlates GPS data, financial transactions, communication logs, and biometric stress responses to identify insider threats. Raina, what are you doing? Garrett hissed, stepping toward me. Stop this. You are having an episode. And to demonstrate Veritas, I continued, ignoring him completely. I thought we would use a live data set, a case study in betrayal. Let us look at the data from a subject we will call the husband. I clicked the remote. The screen exploded into light. It was not a slide deck. It was a mirror of Garrett's phone, the second phone, the work phone. The first image to appear was the contact card for Serafina, but it was not just the name. It was the text history, scrolling rapidly and then freezing on the message from the night of the discovery. Serafina. I have the power of attorney papers ready. Tomorrow we start the plan to commit her. A gasp went through the audience. It started as a low rumble and rose to a collective intake of breath. Garrett turned around. He saw the screen. His face drained of blood so fast, he looked like a corpse standing upright. That is fake, Serafina screamed from the side of the podium. That is a deep fake. She is crazy. Is it? I asked coolly. Let us check the geolocation data. I clicked the remote again. A map appeared. It showed 2 dots moving in perfect synchronization over the last 3 years. Hotels in Zurich, a villa in Cabo, and a house in Naperville. And who lives in Naperville? I asked. The screen changed again. The photos Elias had taken. The house. The swing set. And the picture of Garrett holding the toddler. Date: June 24th, 2023. Subject: Leo. Father: Garrett Whitmore. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of 500 people realizing they were witnessing a moral autopsy. "You told me you were infertile." "Garrett," I said, turning to him. He was backing away, his hands raised as if to ward off a physical blow. "You cried in my arms. You let me comfort you, all while you were playing house with my cousin on my dime." "Raina, please," Garrett croaked. His microphone was still on. Everyone heard the desperation. "I can explain. It is complicated." "It is not complicated," I said. "It is simple. You wanted my money. You wanted my company, but you did not want me. So you decided to remove me." I clicked the remote one more time. "Ladies and gentlemen," I addressed the crowd. "Corporate theft is one thing, adultery is another. But what happens when the thief gets desperate? What happens when the audit is looming?" The audio file began to play. It was crystal clear. The acoustics of the ballroom amplified every whisper. Garrett's voice. "There is no version of this where Raina Whitmore lives and we stay free." Serafina's voice. "Can you do it? Can you actually kill her?" Garrett's voice. "She is already dead. Sarah, it is her or us. We get the signature at 8 o'clock. We take her home at 9. By 10 she is gone. We call the police. We cry. She takes too many of her pills. A suicide." The audio ended. The horror in the room was palpable. People were standing up. Chairs were being knocked over. The press photographers were going insane. The flashes erupting like a strobe light storm. Serafina dropped the portfolio. She looked at the exit, then at Garrett, then at me. She looked like a trapped rat. Garrett was shaking his head, mouthing the word no over and over again. He looked at the crowd, pleading for an ally, but all he saw were faces of disgust and shock. The mask of the charming venture capitalist had been ripped off, revealing the monster underneath. "You said the second phone was for work," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. I walked up to him until I was inches from his face. "You were right. Deceiving me was your full-time job, but you forgot one thing. Garrett, I am the boss, and I am firing you." I pointed to the screen one last time. "And just so we are thorough," I said, looking at Serafina, "let us see what happens when a thief tries to steal from a security company." The video of Serafina in my office played. The timestamp was yesterday. The file name, Project Chimera, was clearly visible on the screen as she dragged it to her hard drive. "That is federal espionage," I stated calmly. "Theft of trade secrets. And since you emailed it to a competitor in Shenzhen this morning," "Yes, I tracked that too. It is treason." Serafina let out a wail and collapsed to her knees, burying her face in her hands. I stood center stage, the lights reflecting off the tears that I finally allowed to fall. Not tears of sadness, but tears of pure, unadulterated rage. I looked down at the man I had loved. He was a ruin. He was destroyed. "Security," I said into the microphone, "please escort these trespassers off my stage." From the back of the room, the doors burst open, but it was not private security. It was a tactical team from the FBI, followed by uniformed police officers. Elias had timed it perfectly. Garrett looked at the police, then back at me. "Raina," he whispered, "I loved you." I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Garrett," I said, "you loved the lifestyle. You just hated the landlord." The police swarmed the stage. The cuffs clicked onto Garrett's wrists. The sound was the most satisfying thing I had ever heard. As they dragged him away, he kept looking back at me, his eyes wide with the shock of a man who thought he was playing chess, only to realize he was standing on a firing range. I did not look away. I watched him until he was shoved through the exit doors. Then, I turned back to the stunned, silent crowd. I smoothed my dress. I approached the podium one last time. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, my voice steady. "Now, about the next 10 years of Aegis Dynamics. We have some work to do." The applause started slowly. One person, then another, then the whole room. It was thunderous. It was not polite anymore. It was the sound of respect. They weren't clapping for a victim. They were clapping for a survivor who had just burned her enemies to ash and built a throne from the cinders. The silence that had gripped the grand ballroom shattered like a dropped mirror. It did not break into applause. Not yet. It broke into the chaotic noise of a reality being dismantled in real time. The audio recording of my husband plotting my murder was still echoing in the rafters. A ghostly admission of guilt that hung over the 500 guests like a toxic cloud. Garrett was the first to snap. The shock that had paralyzed him melted instantly into a feral, desperate rage. He realized that the narrative had not just slipped from his grasp. It had been weaponized against him. He looked at the massive LED screen behind us, where his text messages and the damning photos of his secret child were still displayed in high definition. He looked at the press, whose cameras were flashing like a stroboscopic lightning storm, capturing every second of his ruin. Then he looked at me. His eyes were not the eyes of the man I had married. They were the eyes of a cornered animal. "Turn it off!" he screamed, his voice cracking into a guttural roar. "Turn it off right now!" He lunged. He did not lunge at me. He lunged at the podium, aiming for the laptop and the control interface that was projecting his sins to the world. He moved with a violence I had never seen in him, his hands clawing out to rip the cables, to smash the screen, to kill the truth. But I had anticipated this. I had lived with this man for 5 years. I knew that beneath the polished veneer of the venture capitalist lay a man with a fragile temper, before his fingers could even graze the metal of the laptop. A wall of black fabric materialized between him and the podium. It was my head of security, a man named Marcus, a former linebacker who had been on my personal payroll for a decade. Unbeknownst to Garrett, Marcus did not tackle him. He simply stepped into Garrett's path. Garrett slammed into him with a sickening thud, bouncing off Marcus's chest like a bird hitting a windshield. "Mr. Whitmore," Marcus said, his voice low and bored. "I would not do that." Garrett scrambled back, panting, his hair wild, his tie askew. He looked around the stage, searching for an exit, searching for anything that could stop the hemorrhage of his life. "She is lying," Garrett shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. He spun toward the crowd, appealing to the investors he had charmed for years. "This is fake. She doctored the audio. She is having a psychotic break. Help me. Someone help me stop her." The crowd did not move. They stared at him with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. No one was going to help him. They had heard the tape. They knew exactly what kind of plan he had been discussing. While Garrett was imploding center stage, I saw movement in my peripheral vision. Serafina. My cousin had pulled herself up from the floor. She was not looking at Garrett. She was looking at the service exit door, a glowing red sign 20 feet to the left of the stage. She had kicked off her high heels. She was holding her dress up with one hand, clutching her purse with the other. She was going to run. She bolted. For a woman who claimed to be a delicate artist, she moved with surprising speed. She scrambled down the side stairs of the stage, knocking over a flower arrangement in her haste to reach the darkness of the wings. She made it 3 steps past the curtain line. Then, a figure stepped out from the shadows. He was leaning casually against a lighting rig, looking like a man waiting for a bus. It was Elias Thorne. Serafina skidded to a halt, her bare feet sliding on the polished floor. She tried to dodge left, but 2 uniformed Aegis security officers stepped out to block her path. She turned right, and 2 more appeared. Elias stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. He looked down at her with a pitiable expression. "Going somewhere, Miss Serafina?" Elias asked, his voice carrying over the commotion. "The party is just getting started, and I believe you are the guest of honor." "Let me go!" she screamed, lashing out with her purse. "I did not do anything. It was him. It was all Garrett." Elias caught her wrist mid-swing. He did not hurt her, but his grip was iron. He turned her around and marched her back toward the stage, depositing her next to the huddled form of my husband. I stood alone at the podium. I adjusted the microphone. I looked at the two people who had plotted to steal my breath, my mind, and my legacy. They looked small now, stripped of their secrets. They were just two greedy children who had played with fire and were surprised to find themselves burning. I walked over to Garrett. He was breathing hard, held in place by Marcus's grip on his shoulder. He looked up at me. There were tears in his eyes, but they were tears of self-pity. "Raina," he choked out. "Raina, please, we can talk about this. Not here, not in front of them." I looked down at him. I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The sorrow was gone. All that was left was the cold, hard clarity of a completed contract. "Do you remember what you said to me the night I found the phone?" I asked. My voice was amplified, booming through the hall so every reporter could hear. Garrett shook his head, confused. "You said the second phone was for work," I continued, leaning in close so he could see the lack of mercy in my eyes. "You were right. Garrett, it was for work. Your work was to deceive me. Your work was to infiltrate my company. Your work was to murder me." I straightened up and gestured to the screen behind me, where the image of the police arriving at the venue was now displayed on a live feed from the exterior security cameras. "And tonight," I said, "I have officially signed off on your project. I have audited your work, and I am rejecting the deliverable." The double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open with a crash that made half the room jump. "Federal agents!" a voice bellowed. "Nobody move!" A dozen agents in FBI windbreakers swept into the room, followed by Chicago PD officers. They moved with practiced efficiency, parting the sea of tuxedos and ball gowns. The guests scrambled out of the way, clutching their champagne glasses, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. The lead agent marched up the stairs to the stage. I nodded to him. We had spoken 3 hours ago. He approached Garrett and Serafina. He pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "Garrett Whitmore," the agent said, his voice flat and professional. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny." Garrett went limp. His legs gave out. If Marcus had not been holding him, he would have collapsed into a heap on the floor. He did not fight as they pulled his arms behind his back. The fight had left him the moment the badge appeared. He just stared at the floor, muttering something unintelligible. Then the agent turned to Serafina. "Serafina Vance," he said, "you are under arrest for corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, and conspiracy to commit murder." That was when Serafina broke. As the officer grabbed her wrists, she let out a shriek that sounded more banshee than human. She began to thrash, kicking out at the officers, her hair flying wild around her face. "No, no!" she screamed. Her face contorted into a mask of ugly desperation. "I did not want to kill her. I told him no. It was Garrett. He made me do it. He said he would leave me if I did not help him." She twisted her body, looking directly at the cameras, desperate to spin a narrative that would save her. "He is the one," she yelled, pointing her chin at Garrett. "He is the mastermind. I am just a victim. He groomed me. Raina, tell them he manipulated me just like he manipulated you." Garrett lifted his head slowly. He looked at her. The disgust on his face was absolute. "You greedy witch," Garrett whispered, but the microphone picked it up. "You were the one who wanted the billions. You were the one who stole the Chimera files." "Because you were too weak to get the money," she spat back. The officers dragged them toward the wings. The flashbulbs were blinding now. The press was getting the photo of the decade, the golden couple of Chicago, one in handcuffs, the other standing tall in victory, while the other woman was dragged away screaming like a lunatic. I waited until they were off the stage. I waited until Serafina's screams had faded into the corridor. Then I turned back to the microphone. The room was silent again. The shock had worn off, replaced by a hungry curiosity. They wanted to know about the stolen technology. They wanted to know about the $4 billion Serafina had tried to steal. "I have one final announcement," I said, my voice calm, bringing the energy of the room back to me. "Regarding Project Chimera, A hush fell over the crowd. The investors leaned forward. This was the money question. My cousin believed she was stealing a revolutionary quantum decoding algorithm, I said. She believed she was stealing the keys to the kingdom. She believed she could sell it to a competitor in Shenzhen for a fortune. I paused. I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. But as I said, I am a security expert. I do not leave billion-dollar weapons lying around on unsecured hard drives. I clicked the remote one last time. The screen behind me changed. It showed a complex diagram of code, red and angry. Project Chimera is not an AI, I revealed. It is a payload. It is a piece of aggressive malware I designed specifically for this scenario. We call it a honeypot in the industry. It looks like treasure, but it acts like a bomb. I looked at the camera lens. I was speaking directly to the competitor who had bought the stolen files from Serafina this morning. When Serafina transferred those files to the buyer's server, I explained, Chimera did not decrypt anything. Instead, it executed a root-level command. It encrypted their entire database. It wiped their backups. And then, it broadcasted their GPS location and their IP address directly to the FBI Cybercrimes Division. The room erupted. Laughter mixed with applause. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated admiration. The people who bought that file are currently being raided by international authorities, I continued. Serafina did not sell them a fortune. She sold them their own arrest warrants. I stepped back from the podium. Aegis Dynamics is safe, I declared. My assets are secure, and the threat has been neutralized. Thank you for coming to our 10th anniversary. Please, enjoy the dessert. I hear the chocolate lava cake is excellent. I did not wait for the applause this time. I turned and walked off the stage. Behind me, the ballroom exploded. The sound was deafening. It was a standing ovation from the wolves of Wall Street, cheering for the alpha who had just proven she had the sharpest teeth in the pack. I walked into the wings. Elias was waiting for me. He handed me a bottle of water. That was theatrical, he noted, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. It was necessary, I said, taking a sip. My hands were finally steady. Did the police get the physical drive from Serafina? They did, Elias confirmed. And the buyer in Shenzhen has already been taken into custody. It is a clean sweep. Reina, you won. I looked back at the stage, where the screen was still glowing with the logo of my company. I thought about Garrett. I thought about the life I had thought I was building. It was gone, all of it. The dinners, the laughter, the shared dreams. It was all ash. But as I walked toward the exit, flanked by my security team, I realized I did not feel empty. I felt heavy. Yes, the weight of the betrayal would take time to lift, but I also felt something else. I felt unbreakable. I walked out the back door of the Palmer house and into the cool Chicago night. The air smelled of rain and exhaust fumes. It smelled like freedom. I took out my phone. I deleted Garrett's contact, then Serafina's. I looked at the city skyline, the buildings rising like jagged teeth against the dark sky. I had built my castle among them. They had tried to throw me off the ramparts. They forgot that I was the one who designed the drop. Let's go home, Elias, I said, stepping into the waiting car. I have a company to run. 6 months is a long time in the world of business, but it is a blink of an eye in the context of healing. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass of my new corner office, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The city looked different to me now. Before, it had been a grid of potential threats, a landscape of competitors and thieves. Now, it looked like a kingdom I had conquered. The sun was setting, painting the steel skyscrapers in shades of violet and burnt orange, a reflection of the peace that had finally settled in my chest. My new office was not in the same building as before. I had moved the entire headquarters of Aegis Dynamics to a new, state-of-the-art facility on the riverfront. The old office held too many ghosts, too many memories of Garrett walking through the halls, shaking hands with the employees he was planning to rob. I needed clean slate. I needed air that had not been recycled through a ventilation system corrupted by lies. The stock ticker on the wall behind me was glowing green. Aegis Dynamics was trading at $450 a share, an all-time high. The Veritas demo at the gala had not just saved the company, it had revolutionized the industry. Every bank, every law firm, and every government agency wanted the system that had caught Garrett Whitmore. They did not just want security software, they wanted the Whitmore Protocol. They wanted the technology created by the woman who caught her own husband. I had become something of a folk hero in the financial world. The Iron Widow who turned a personal tragedy into a billion-dollar quarterly profit. But the money was just numbers on a screen. The real victory was in the silence. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. It was a strange legal proceeding. Usually, divorces are messy wars over assets and custody. Mine was a simple administrative stamp. Garrett could not contest anything from a federal holding cell. His assets, what little he had left after the government seized the laundered funds, were liquidated to pay for his legal defense, a defense that failed miserably. The trial had been swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The audio recordings, the video of Serafina stealing the malware, the forensic trail of the shell companies, it was airtight. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. I did not go to the sentencing. I did not need to see them in orange jumpsuits to know they were gone. Elias had gone in my place. He told me that when the judge read the verdict, Serafina wept loudly, begging for mercy, claiming she was a victim of circumstance. Garrett, true to his nature, sat in stony silence, his jaw clenched, still trying to maintain some shred of dignity even as the bailiff shackled his hands. 25 years, that was the sentence. 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, corporate espionage, and grand larceny. They would be eligible for parole in 18 years, but given the federal nature of the crimes, I doubted they would see the sun before they were old and gray. And then there was the matter of the innocent. I turned away from the window and picked up a file from my desk. It was a thin folder, unmarked. Inside was a single photograph and a report from a social worker. Leo, the boy with the sandy hair and Garrett's eyes, he was the one variable that had kept me awake at night. He was the son of a monster and a thief. But he was just a child. He did not ask to be born into a conspiracy. When his parents were arrested, he had been placed into the state foster care system. The media had tried to find him, hungry for a picture of the secret son, but I had used my resources to scrub his digital existence. I could not raise him. Every time I looked at him, I would see the man who tried to kill me. I would see the betrayal. I was not a saint. And I knew my own limitations. I could not be his mother, but I could be his guardian angel. I had established a blind trust. The Phoenix Fund. It was completely anonymous. The money would ensure that Leo was placed with a high-quality foster family, one that had been vetted by my own private investigators. It would pay for his education, his health care, and his therapy. It would pay for college when the time came. He would never know where the money came from. He would never know that the woman his parents tried to destroy was the one ensuring he had a future. I looked at the photo of him playing in a sandbox at his new foster home. He looked happy. He looked safe. "Goodbye, Leo," I whispered, closing the folder and locking it in my drawer. Be better than them. I checked my watch. It was 7 in the evening. The office was quiet. Most of the staff had gone home. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. I picked it up. A text message. Elias. The new Italian place on Wacker Drive has a 3-month waiting list. I hacked their reservation system. We have a table at 8. Don't be late. I smiled. A genuine, warm smile that reached my eyes. Elias Thorne. The man who had lived in the shadows was slowly stepping into the light. We had not defined what we were. We were partners. We were allies. We were the only 2 people who knew the full weight of the truth. But lately, the dinners were becoming more frequent. The conversations were drifting away from business and toward books, music, and the future. He was not Garrett. He did not charm me with flowers or empty compliments. He showed his care by encrypting my phone and checking the brake lines on my car. It was a strange love language. But after what I had survived, it was the only language I understood. "I will be there," I typed back. "And stop hacking innocent restaurants." Elias. "They have weak firewalls." It offended me. I laughed. Grabbing my coat, I walked out of the office, nodding to the night security team. They stood straighter as I passed. They respected me, not because I signed their checks, but because they knew I was one of them. I drove myself home first to change. The drive to the penthouse was smooth. The city lights blurred past me, a river of diamonds. When I arrived at the Millennium Tower, I did not feel the old dread. The penthouse was no longer a cage. I had gutted the interior. The heavy curtains were gone, replaced by smart glass that turned opaque with a voice command. The Persian rugs were gone, replaced by sleek, modern hardwood. The furniture was minimalist and sharp, but the biggest change was invisible. I walked to the front door. I did not use a key. I stood in front of the scanner. "Welcome home, Reina." The system's voice, a calm, synthetic alto, greeted me. The door clicked open. I walked inside. The lights adjusted automatically to my preferred amber hue. The temperature was exactly 68 degrees. I walked to the center of the living room. I tapped the control panel on the wall. A holographic display of the apartment's security status appeared. Every window was monitored by vibration sensors. The air vents had chemical sniffers to detect gas or toxins. The elevator had facial recognition software that was linked to the Interpol database. If anyone who was not on my guest list tried to step onto my floor, the system would lock the elevator car between floors and alert the police before they could even push the button. It was a fortress. It was an impregnable sanctuary. I poured myself a glass of water, tap water, because I trusted my filtration system more than any bottle, and walked out onto the terrace. The wind was brisk. Coming off the lake, I looked down at the city, 600 feet below. Somewhere down there, in a concrete facility surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, Garrett and Serafina were sitting in their cells. They were probably sleeping on thin mattresses, listening to the sounds of other inmates, eating food that tasted like cardboard. I took a sip of water, the liquid cool and clean against my throat. I thought about the irony of it all. They had been obsessed with security. Garrett had his secret phones, his encrypted chats, his hidden accounts. Serafina had her lies, her fake personas, her backups. They had spent years building walls of deception to keep me out, to keep the truth out. They wanted a life where they never had to work again. They wanted a life where everything was provided for them. They wanted to be safe from financial worry. Well, they got it. They wanted a life of luxury on my dime, I said to the wind, my voice calm and final. In the end, they got exactly what they wished for. They are living in rooms fully funded by the state. They have 24-hour security guarding their doors. Their meals are prepared for them. They never have to worry about a mortgage or a bill again. I turned back to the warmth of my apartment, the sensors blinking a comforting green in the periphery of my vision. It is a shame, I mused, sliding the glass door shut and locking it with a thumbprint. The only difference between a penthouse and a prison is who holds the key. They are locked in. I am locked out. I picked up my purse. I had a dinner date. I had a company to run. I had a life to live. I have learned the most expensive lesson of all, I whispered to the empty, safe room. True safety does not come from walls, or sensors, or billion-dollar algorithms. It comes from turning around and knowing exactly who is standing behind you. I walked out the door, leaving the lights on. I didn't need to hide in the dark anymore. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal and justice. I hope you enjoyed Reina's journey from a deceived wife to the architect of her own freedom. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment down below telling me which country or city you are listening in. It is always amazing to see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Sweet Rose Drama channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you more powerful stories like this one. See you in the next episode.